So, dear students, in today's session, I'm going to grapple with new criticism, one of the important critical locations in the field of literary studies. Dear students, new criticism. What is so new about new criticism? That's how I would like to begin. We know criticism, right? May I ask the participants to tell me the meaning of criticism? What is criticism? Let me begin my session with this particular question. What is criticism?
Judging a literary work.
Very good. Judging a literary work. It can be a poem or a novel, anything, right, which is considered as a literary piece. Very good. So, like we always have this tradition of judging or evaluating a literary text. And how do we evaluate literary text? So, this is something very important. Usually, what happens, we are taking into account the autobiographical elements of the author, historical background, historical context in which a particular text, literary text, is written, or social and cultural context in which the characters emerge in a particular literary text. So we usually, the critics take into consideration all these elements, autobiographical elements, historical context, socio-cultural metrics into consideration while evaluating a particular literary work. When I say literary work, it can be any work, it can be any literary form. It can be poem, or a novel, an essay, play, but a literary work. So when we use the word new criticism, what happens in new criticism is that a set of scholars, a particular way of approaching a literary text, a particular methodology of evaluating, judging a literary text. First, this particular criticism, new criticism, started as a movement replacing the biocritical and historical methods, which were very prominent in the field of literary studies during 19th and 20th centuries. As I said earlier, prior to new criticism, biographical criticism and historical criticism, these two things have already been grappled with, dealt with by Dr. Nani in yesterday's session. I'm not repeating what is biocritical means taking into account author's intentions, his life, his or her life, while evaluating a particular literary text. Historical criticism, like taking into account the historical forces, historical events that had triggered narratives in the form of a literary text. So, new critics started avoiding social and cultural elements while evaluating a particular literary text. So that's why I say that new criticism started as a movement replacing both biocritical and historical methods that dominated literary studies in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And here I would like to refer to what Alan Tate, one of the famous new critics, Alan Tate, A-L-L-E-N, Alan Tate, T-A-T-E, Alan Tate, student of Ronsum. I'll tell you who is he. Alan Tate is student of a famous new critic. Alan Tate says, Alan Tate wanted criticism to judge literature and not leave it to history to do it. See, you try to understand what Alan Tate is trying to say. He wanted to see literature as literature, but not allow history or historical elements to overshadow the judgment of literature. So these two, I'm beginning my class with these two particular references. One temporal reference, that is how and when new criticism began in the 19th and early 20th centuries, and what new critics had mind while establishing various tenets of new criticism. Yeah, as I said, I have already told that the life and times of the author were sidelined. This is a very, very prominent, characteristics of new criticism. The life and times of the author, they may be of interest to the historian, but not necessarily to the new critic. New critics, they knew that the life and times of the author, they are important to historian but not to critic. That's what that's the assumption, that's the motto they had while evaluating, judging a particular literary text. And new critics argued that the text itself provides all evidences, whatever component is required to elucidate, to interpret a text, all these components are available, and should be seen sourced within the text itself. This is the one of the configurations of new criticism. The text itself provides all evidences which can be examined and corroborated through its formal elements. When I say formal elements, like image, metaphor, plot, story, character, all these components. So these components were highlighted and taken into consideration, like image, metaphor, plot, narratives, story, and characters, roles in a particular literary text. These were the subject of focus, for the new critics. Well, now I'll just like to refer to a few important critics. They need not necessarily be considered as new critics in the purest terms, in the absolute terms, but still the way they had approached text, the way they are identified in the trajectory of literary studies, makes them as seminal figures in the field of new criticism as well. So first we have I.R. Richards, who proposed practical criticism. Nanny has already spoken practical. I don't want to repeat what Nanny has already spoken and discussed in our previous in yesterday's session. And William Emerson's 7 Types of Ambiguity, and T.S. Eliot, another prominent writer. He also made contributions such as Tradition and Individual Talent, and Hamlet and his problems. Just I am referring to the writers and their works which have contributed, paved way to the growth or establishment of or configuration of new criticism. So now we come across a fascinating scholar, a critic named John Crowe Ransom. Remember, I referred to his student's name, Alan Tate. Alan Tate is the student of John Crowe Ransom. John Crowe, in 1941, John Crowe Ransom writes a text, a book called The New Criticism. With this particular text, this is the text which had popularized, which had given a strong foundation to a particular mode of criticism called as new criticism. Prior to John Crowe Ransom, there were a few critics like I.R. Richards, William Emerson, T.S. Eliot. They had used the methods of new criticism, but they did not use the word new. It is John Crowe Ransom who had used the word new criticism. So that's why many scholars, literary, they consider John Crowe Ransom as the pioneer of new criticism, and some people say is the founder of new criticism. That's still worth negotiating. I hope you're with me, dear participants. So, and also let me tell you that whatever I'm displaying over here on my slides on the screen, available generally on internet and any text of theory. I'm trying to give you the simplistic understanding of new criticism. Since our organizer, Dr. Padmashri, had told that the target group of these lectures are lectures is UG students. So that's why I'm trying to give you the simplistic understanding of new criticism. And as I have already mentioned at the beginning of my session, the focus is on text and close reading. How a text is being focused is through close reading. New critics argued that they argued that um, text is a totalic artifact. This is very, very important. New criticism is founded on the premise that the text is an autotelic artifact. It can stand for its own sake. It can the content available within the text is can help us substantiate our understanding of the text itself. That's the proposition established by new critics. So new critics strongly believe that the text is an autotelic artifact. It is complete. It is complete and wholesome in itself. So, and it exists for its own sake. This is the assumption. This is how they focused on text, a particular literary text. And the relation of the text with the world beyond is not of much interest to the new critics. Though this is very, it may sound repetitive, but I feel that it's necessary to reiterate the configuration of new criticism. The world, its relationship with the world beyond itself is not of much interest to the new critic. The new critic always focuses on what are the characters, what is the structure, what is the plot, what is the story, and what are the characters available text. So these were taken into consideration. The language, how a particular subject is being narrativized, and the language used to narrativize a particular subject. These components were the subject of focus for new critics. So, like in order to bring the focus of literary studies back to the analysis of text, new critics made a few configurations. They made a few parameters, they set a few parameters. First, what they did is they excluded the reader's response. Remember, new criticism is not reader's response. Reader also does not have his or her own involvement in the interpretation. The influence or bias or effect generated by the text on the reader, or the moralistic bias of the reader, is not supposed to be part of the judgment, evaluation of a literary text. So, new critics excluded the reader's response first, and as I have already mentioned, the author's intention, the background of the author, what was the purpose behind writing a particular literary text. All these intentions were the author also sidelined. And historical and cultural context, they were also not taken into consideration. And most importantly, moralistic bias from their analysis, like what is right and wrong, which is good and bad. These are all situations faced by a particular reader, brought up in a particular cultural conditioning. So these moralistic biases were also stopped. The intervention of moralistic biases was also stopped by in the judgment of literary text. So these parameters were used to focus on literary, to bring the focus of literary studies back to the analysis of the text. And we have two groups of new critics. Of course, it began with I.A. Richards, T.S. Eliot, a couple of writers who come from British literary circles. But still, we usually recall the contribution given by the author of New Criticism, that is John Crove Ransom. Ransom, Alan Tate, Warren, William Imsat. These are a few important new critics from America. I'm just referring to the names so that if you have more time or if you want to explore the nature of their approach towards new criticism, you can begin with these critics: Ransom, Tate, Warren, and Wimsatt. And we also have a set of scholars called the British New Critics: Aya Richards, the author of Practical Criticism; William Emerson, F.L. Lewis, L.C. Knights, and Derek Traversy. Like, I'm not saying that these are the only few British new critics. These are the prominent British new critics. So there are many more new critics. You can begin with these critics in order to understand how British new critics approached, used, analyzed a literary text. And having told the structure, configuration, and also brief historical background of new criticism, I also would like to bring to your notice a few important concepts that we come across, the phrases or concepts while understanding new criticism. The first thing that we come across is one of the important concepts that we come across while understanding the configuration structure of new criticism is intentional fallacy. Intentional fallacy. This is a particular term used in 20th century literary criticism to describe the problem inherent in trying to judge a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it. Judging a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created a particular literary text. So new critics avoided this intentional fallacy. New critics said that assuming because the purpose or intention of the writer, behind a writer while writing a particular text is not going to help us understand or judge a literary text in the purest form. Of course, we can access the intention or purpose of the artist who creates a particular text, but new critics always argued that may need not necessarily be absolutely true or absolute truth. New critics said that we may not get the intention or purpose in the strict sense, in the true transparent form. That's what new critics said. So that's why new critics avoided intentional fallacy. I hope it is clear. And they also like another concept that we come across is affective fallacy. It's a misconception that arises from judging a poem by the emotional effect that it produces in the reader. The misconception that arises from judging a poem or a literary text by the emotional effect that it produces in the reader. Sometimes what happens is the reader is being colonized by certain sensitive content in the literary text. When I say emotional effect, it can be a sense of angst, sense of out of place, a kind of pain, a kind of happiness, pleasure. All these things, what is that? These emotional effects, they hinder, they make reader, they deprive, they affect the quality of judging a particular literary text. So that's why affective fallacy was also avoided by new critics. And another prominent intrinsic criticism. What is intrinsic criticism? Intrinsic criticism, it means usually interpretations are based entirely on the content and the language of the text. Interpretations are based entirely on the content, what is there in the text. I had told you images, metaphor, structure, narratives, stories, plot, characters. These are the contents, and the language used to articulate a particular story. These are the subject of focus for new critics. And the criticism, what new critics believe is that the criticism exists within of the text, as I said. So that's why this particular nature of judgment is also, this particular mode of evaluating the literary text is also considered, is also called as intrinsic criticism. This is one of the important concepts that we come across while understanding new criticism, dear students. And having said it, having said, what is new criticism and how it works, its configuration, certain, important concept that we come across while understanding new criticism, we also need to understand why new criticism paved way to other forms of criticism later on, right? We don't use new criticism these days widely. Of course, there is no escape from any form of criticism. While evaluating a particular text, I really personally don't think that a reader, consciously and unconsciously, he escapes from the structural contours, the metrics of any form of literary criticism. But still, new criticism lost its momentum after a particular time. So the reasons for this, as René Belloc, one of the important literary essayists and a critic, he says in his work, The New Criticism, Pro and Contra, he highlights a set of problems with new criticism. He discusses a few issues with shortcomings of new criticism, and the prominent things that I would like you to know is, the first thing is, René Belloc says new criticism, it is very esoteric and aestheticism. This is one of the important reasons why new criticism lost its momentum. Esoteric means only few individuals, only few scholars, experts in the field of literary studies or criticism could understand a literary text within the horizon of new criticism. So not many people could apply or stick to the epistemic structure of new criticism, this configuration of new criticism. So that's why he makes charges against new criticism. See, he says that whenever there was no concern with the social function of literature, the new criticism failed to understand the social forces, forget about historical elements in a literary text. But René Belloc says that new critics, they did not take into consideration the social relevance of literature. When a particular writer had produced a particular literary text, there was always a social function to it, a particular agenda. But new critics failed to focus on the social functions of literature, understand the social function of literature. So that lack of social concerns also became a hindrance in its growth. That's why esoteric aestheticism becomes one of the short sights of new criticism. And René Belloc goes ahead with another important observation. He says that any criticism that has no consideration for past or history, that blocks way to access knowledge. That's what he says. So that's why he says that since new criticism or new critics ignore historical forces that had inspired a writer to produce a particular literary text, or the historical context in which a particular text is written down, penned down, that particular historical phenomena is being gravely ignored by new critics. That is why this nature of being unhistorical, not giving concern or regard to history, has also made the new criticism to lose its momentum. That's the important point he makes. The text is isolated from its origins. When its origins, the forces that had inspired the writer to pen down a particular text, when all these forces are not being understood by a literary critic, then the understanding or judgment is incomplete. That's what the Neverlex says in his The New Criticism, Pro and Contra. So it is unsound in its principles, like many scholars claim, along with Neverlex, that new criticism its principles. How can one exclude the historical context, social relevance, and be esoteric, right? In this way, new criticism is unsound in its principles. This is a claim that was made, and incompatible with inquiry, for it concerns itself with only the two elements which constitute a work. When I say two elements, the subject and the words, the language in which it is expressed. Only language and the subject. So when I say subject, the formal elements like plot, characters, image, metaphors, narratives, these are the things which are available in a particular text. They are the subject of focus for new critics, but only through these elements one cannot derive at a particular understanding of a text, a judgment of a text. And the judgment, if whatever, if someone overlooks historical importance, configuration, context, authorial intentions, such kind of judgment is incomplete. That's what many critics started saying. Having mentioned the problems with new criticism, let me also tell one of the strong element or positive aspect of new criticism, a positive aspect that has kept new criticism alive in today's classrooms, in today's ways of interpreting literary text. Even though we may fail to, or we don't want to acknowledge new criticism, but what I feel is that there's one component that has, that makes us relook at new criticism again and again. That component is nothing but the mode of interpreting a particular text by giving a careful reading. Careful reading means close reading of text, literary text. This methodology is still, it is very, very important in today's scenario. If you want to interpret a text, it is always feasible to give a close reading of the text, because that makes your perception transparent and strong. So the close reading, the strength, it's the close reading of text that new criticism taught us is now practiced as a regular pedagogical method in teaching and learning still today. Of course, I agree that we don't acknowledge new criticism, but certain component, element of new criticism, that is close reading, this particular element of new criticism is still practiced as a regular pedagogical method in teaching and learning. So in this way, new criticism is never to be invalidated. It's never invalid. This is one of the important strengths of new criticism. I hope I've made sense. My lecture has made sense. If you have any doubts, questions, I'll be more than happy to address your questions. So with this one, I'll put a full stop to my lecture.
So my question is, while explaining affective fallacy, you said that the reader shouldn't be misguided by the emotions that are expressed in a text. But what if the text contains some emotional aspects or feelings, sir.
This is this is also one of the shortcoming, the problem with new criticism. On one side, new critics say that the readers should not be carried away by certain emotional effects generated by the text itself, because new critics believe that for example, when there is so much tragedy in the text, when the protagonist is suffering, the reader is always associating himself or herself with the plight of the protagonist. So when a reader is touched by this emotional effects, what is happening is that there is lots of sympathy towards characters, and bias is being generated, emotional bias. Okay, so the criticism will always, the criticism of, assume a reader is criticizing certain characters, certain roles, a good character or bad character, whatever it is. Then the reader, if a reader is emotionally affected by certain elements in the text, what happens is that certain characters, certain individuals in a literary text become very close to means a reader, and then there is no unbiased evaluation of literary text. That's what they say. Means there is always a misconception. This emotional effect, if a reader is influenced by a particular character in a literary text, then there can be lots of misconceptions about other characters in a literary text. That's why new critics say that affective fallacy is one of those elements that a reader, a critic has to overcome. Okay, I hope it's making sense.
Yes,
Means
thank you.
it's more of like being unbiased towards looking at characters as characters, not as some characters favorite to me, some characters as antagonistic to my nature. My means reader is not supposed to involve his own personal, his or her personal experience, biases in the interpretation or judgment of a literary text. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, good question. Purvi Nag has asked the question: is new criticism considered so important today? See, I'm not saying it is so important, but it is one of the important criticisms. Okay, schools of criticism. Yeah, as I said, see, even though we have different modes of criticisms, we came across post-structuralist modes, deconstruction, different schools of thoughts exist today, but this foundation of new criticism, the foundation means close reading. This is one of the strongest components of new criticism. This component, the idea of giving idea of close reading, which has been popularized by new critics. It had existed earlier, and also it exists after post new criticism phase as well. But close reading, which was popularized by new critics, it is still today, it's very, very important. Even if we don't refer to new criticism, but its elements, that is one of the elements, that is new close reading, has been followed in the strict sense. If you want to critique of literary text, understanding the components of the text, primary text, is very, very important. So in order to understand the component of a text, one has to give a careful, in-depth understanding of various components, formal components of the text. So only close reading can materialize this in-depth understanding. Close reading is one of those components that materializes in-depth understanding of a literary text. So that's why new criticism is still studied but not not the way new critics propose. Some of its components are also inculcated, used while judging, evaluating a literary text, even today. Yeah. Well, see, again, the definition of good critic and bad critic, it varies from scholar to scholar, person to person. Like the way I define the nature of a good critic may be different from the way Padma Shri defines. Okay, maybe the way you, as a reader or a student, define the nature of good critic. So, but generally, what is said is that a good critic is someone who is aware of I mean, of course, if you look at the debates that have gone, even Eliot talks about theory of impersonality, that in his tradition and individual talent. Simultaneously, there are also literary critics who say that the personal biases of a reader should not be part of the criticism or judgment. Also, some critics say that the personal experience, the lived experience of reader can help a reader to understand the text in a concrete sense. So the answer to what distinguishes good critics from bad critics, that's vast. It's a debatable, negotiable, and it's an open-ended discussion altogether, Rizwana. Because there is no particular structure to call someone, features or characteristics to call someone as good critics or someone as bad critics. But what I feel is that probably, according to me, good critic is someone who takes into account the historical context, social context in which a particular character is developed in a text, and the cultural metrics that has shaped, that have shadowed or nurtured narratives in a text, and also in-depth understanding of the cultural relativism. All these things, I feel, that make a reader a good critic. So bad critic is someone maybe who is who cultural context, of course, authorial intention, or maybe not giving any serious consideration for the autobiographical elements of the author. I'm not saying that focusing only on the text is not a feasible option. I'm not saying it, but when somebody focuses only on the text, what is the outcome of that interpretation? What is the outcome of that focus? And what a reader is going to do with that derivation, that understanding. If a reader believes that whatever he or she understands and tries to impose the meaning or understand his or her understanding of the text as an absolute truth, then such kind of critics can be called bad critics, according to me. Yeah, well, contribution of new criticism to literary theory. One of the contributions is, see, certain problems of new criticism. Criticism has also contributed to literary theories. Okay, for example, new critics who look historical context. New critics did not look beyond the text, but later on, this particular problem of new criticism itself has led to the development of various critical modes of criticizing a particular text. So the problems of new criticism, both problems and strengths of new criticism, have definitely helped in the trajectory of literary theory.